Good morning. I'm alive. I'm just adjusting this a little bit here. I don't know. Every time I try and make it work, it doesn't work. Here we are. Today, I wanted to talk about the tools that I have used in being a psychic and a reader and a transformational therapist. Mainly because you can't see it yet, but I have this large crystal ball sitting here. And I want to talk about how things evolved for me over the years. This here is a tiny bowl where if I click it, you might be able to pick up the sound. This is for clearing. So if I had a client that was in and was the energy was everywhere, and this is just a tiny little one. I had a bigger one, which gets used by my friend Marion on Monday nights. So she plays the bowl for me, and that helps me because we're not in the same place, but it helps. So if you want to clear energy, you want a higher sort of a pitch. And if I play this, you'll hear it the way it just moves a little bit. Um, this tiny little one sits on my desk. I don't really have to ding it too often, but it's sometimes helpful also just to clear your own energy when you get upset about something or whatever. What I really found I wanted to talk about was this. Well, it's can't see it, but this big crystal ball. If someone had told me at one time I could read crystal balls, I would have thought they were crazy. But as the years go by, or went by, I should say, and I became more and more aware of how to look, how to see, I bought this crystal ball. It's a big one, but can't travel with a big ball like that. So I have a little one. And when I used to travel, because I used to produce psychic fairs and be in psychic fairs, and so I would have this little bowl that would travel. But this was my traveling bowl, as I would say, because it's they're heavy. That's why traveling with this big one, it would sit on my desk at my reading desk at home in my office. But this one would travel with me. We've been many, many miles, and it's got a few little kinks in it where it's fallen on the floor and had some interesting times. Now, I'm going to talk about how do you read a crystal ball. The one thing a lot of people think you just look right at it. That's not. It's like you come in looking at an angle, and what happens is you're dealing with your third eye here. Your third eye is right in here, and it develops the clairvoyant element of yourself, and you learn not. You don't look like a lot of people. A lot of people in movies and that you see people look like that. They don't. You don't look like that. You look down kind of at an angle. Just hang on, I'll hold this one up. So you're looking at it like this. And I wasn't naturally a clairvoyant. I was a clairsensory. I feel a sense of knowing comes over me about things. But utilizing the crystal balls, I became much more clairvoyant. Got to the point, actually, I've got these colors that sit here. These are a whole pile of colors. I began drawing people's auras. Um, and remember, this happened over a number of years and in doing different things and exploring different things. But sometimes by just picking up, sort of by instinct, certain colors and putting them on a piece of paper, that what began to happen is I began to develop, and I have actually quite a collection of different aura drawings that I've done. I'm not an artist, believe me. Many people in my biological family are artists, but I'm not. My daughter was an incredible artist, but and my son does carves native art um, and beautifully. So the artistic, but it's my grandmother that was the artist, and each one of us grandchildren got a picture. I have one that, in fact, so somebody came in the other day and said, "Oh, what a beautiful, picture." She says, her picture sits right in my doorway coming in, you on the right-hand side. And I said, "Yeah, that's my grandmother. She did that." And somehow, right, it's very interesting that the pictures that each of us grandchildren got is that it really reflects who we are or what we are. So that's, again, talent that comes down in a, you might say, through history. Also, you all know about my tarot cards because we talk about them on Monday nights, numbers. I don't really show you the cards then, but there's 78 cards in a tarot deck. 22 are what we call higher arcana cards. Those are the laws and the lessons that we live by, hopefully. Then we have 4 suits, which have 1 to 10, and then 4 what we call court cards, which are to me are attitudes to life. And it's really interesting. The tarot, I put the tarot card down, we get number 22 of the higher arcana, where everything is totally balanced and everything is aware. It isn't always like that, but it's nice when we get Mr. 20, Miss, because it's a woman, 22. Now, what happens, there's lots of other little things that we use. Probably today, because a lot of the work I do today is clearing people's energy. And I just wanted to show you, I have these sheets. This is a sign up, basically, name, address, etc., how you're going to pay. And then we look at the birth date. The birth date is very, very important because we can get your birth path, we can get your current year, and your age because of the way things happened. But when I'm working on clearing a person's energy, I created this. Now, you're not going to see all the bits and pieces of this, but you can see all these terminologies. There, I'm just going to give you titles. There's what I call levels themselves, which run like physical, etheric, aura, emotional, mental, balancing. That's balancing your energy, that mental, emotional, balanced. Your intellectual, your creative, your psychic, eye, ear, nose, and mouth, intuition. Because very often one of them's blocked or 2 of them are blocked. Your spirituality or your philosophy of life. And anything else, guys, because I always make another thing that I may not have covered. So how would the life is affected? All of them: health, fitness, aging, youth, money, finances, career, purpose. Because sometimes we can have one part of our life working incredibly well and the next part not so well. I also look at the male-female. Now, the male-female energy is very interesting because we have male-female. Now, this is not about, I'm born a female. I am a female, but I carry a lot of male energy. So we want to balance between the male and female. But then there's another level called the masculine and feminine. And then a third level, excuse me, mother-father. So even though we look at someone and say, "Oh yeah, female," there's a lot of other elements that go into this. And also the mother, father, and the matriarch and patriarch, and the genetics. How much of our influenced by the genetics? Who we are coming down from sometimes way, way back. The male-female system, I find, is one of the probably the most complicated. It's not very big. Male, female, masculine, feminine, mother, father, matriarch, patriarch. That's your genetics coming in. But also have a bigger, not just your grandparents, etc., but the whole genetic line. You can have what we call throwbacks, right? And that's when past life regression comes in handy. I also look at what I call selves: high self, earth self, and shadow self. And then I play space for others because I don't always know everything. or everything comes up. And when I get an other, very seldom, I then have to figure out what that other is. It's an affecting a high self. How do we aspire? Earth self. How do we relate to the Mother Earth? A shadow self sits behind other. I'm going to tell a story about the shadow self. I'd been working for years on clearing everything and working with everything. And then I began to hear stories about this shadow self, how horrible it was and how dark, and we have all this shadowy stuff. And so I have guides. Guides are helpers that work with us. So I sat down and I talked to my main guide. And I said, okay, guys, what is it about the shadow self? What is it? All I was hearing was dark, terrible, horrible. This is the worst part of you, blah, blah. Well, they got very excited. Now, when I talk with my guides over the years, I can't say that they used to get very excited. It was very, explaining things or leading me into a different awareness, etc. Well, they got excited. And this is what they said to me. The shadow self is one of your most important and vital selves. Well, I hadn't heard that. All I had heard how horrible it was, how dark it was, etc., etc. And they said, this is why they think that. The shadow self sits behind us. That's why it's called a shadow self. And what people tend to do, things they don't want to deal with, they throw it back there. So the shadow self carries it. So it looks dark because it's everything you don't want to deal with. But in fact, it's your most direct line into what we call the light. So the key here is it's called a shadow because it sits behind you but what we do as humans, and this was the part that intrigued me, what we do as humans is anything we don't want to deal with, our guilt, our regret, pain, all that we throw back there. I don't want to deal with that. Goes back. Well, who's there? The shadow self. So who collects it? So that's why when people started to learn about the shadow self, excuse me here, they ran into all this dark stuff. They didn't see that actually it was a great person or part of us, I should say, part of us in direct what we call light, love. It's just that it was carrying all the stuff we did not want to acknowledge. And so what I found is I began clearing the shadow self for people, that they began to be more effective in their lives. They began to be happier. They began to own their own stuff instead of, don't want to deal with that, throw it away. So when we look at selves, high, earth, and shadow self, and I always have a little element for others, things I don't know about. And occasionally that'll come up, but then I have to find out what it refers to. But remember that when you hear dire things about a shadow self, if you're into looking at that, it's only what you haven't wanted to deal with. It's where you throw things because we throw it back there. We don't want to know it. We don't want to look at it. We don't want anything to do with it. And that part of us, which is one of the best connections we have to the universal love source, gets blocked. I also have down here at the same time when we're looking at what I call systems checks, the soul, other lives, frozen memories. Frozen memories are where we're stuck in time and space. It could be this life, it could be any other life. And I mark the ages where I see that we're stuck. Now we come to energy. What contracts have we made through space and time? Just because we're alive in this life, we've been alive in many lives. If you are aware, sort of like in psychic things, spiritual things, or whatever you wear, that means you've had many lifetimes probably. So what contracts have you made? What oaths have you made? What vows have you made? And what's on the Akashic records? Now, I want to talk about oaths and vows. Oaths tend to come from our male lives. Men make oaths. They declare their, how do I explain it? They declare their fidelity in an army. So they used to be, people had nowhere to go, so they would join an army, and they all had their own little armies all through Europe. And so you would pledge your allegiance to the main guy, which usually had the money to pay everybody. So men had oaths, but what I found, women had vows, because women, if they happened to get pregnant or if they were widowed, even, they would go into an abbey, and then they would have to make a vow going in there. So what I found over the years, even though we may have different lives, like one as a woman, as a man, or is that the oaths tended to be from male lives, vows tended to be from the women lives. And very often we give up our personal power in these other lifetimes, either doing an oath of allegiance or a vow of poverty, a vow of whatever, make a vow. The other element is the Akashic records. The Akashic records it's like I have a meditation. Actually, I used to take people to see their records and read them, but it's like a library of records of decisions you have made. Your your decisions through time is what dictates and works in relation to your life. So you make a decision 13 BC, that decision is recorded. And then something comes along in this life that has a connection of some way, shape, or form, you will make that same decision. That's why decisions that we make that we don't think too much about are actually very, very important. And especially if they're in the Akashic records. And we can go into, I used to, when we get down to that part, when I'm working through these soul correction sheets, we can go in and we usually lead a prayer of forgiveness of self to clear the decision that you made back there that's affecting the life now. And that's why past lives are incredibly important. I began looking at past lives for curiosity and found it very, very interesting. I had many different instructors at the beginning, and then I began to do my own workshops on it. But and I was given a different technique of how to access them. But the Akashic records is where it's written. You know what they say, if you write something, it has more effect. So if you have an Akashic record where something is really written strongly, it's going to show up in your life. And that's where I find very often, where if you're into personal growth, if you're into spiritual growth, people don't look enough to see why you're making the same decisions, why you make the same errors. Is often because they've got a decision back there. Remember, the men, if in your main lives you would have had oaths, same thing. You made an oath, that's a decision. Where females tend to make vows, again, a decision where you give your power away. Vows in particular, more than oaths, give their power away. They give it to somebody else. And so now in this life, you're having to regain that, and that can really make all sorts of things. Also on the energy level, how much of others' energy do you run? I found in my life, because I was open, sensitive, I used to run everybody else's energy but my own. And one of the elements I had to grow and learn was to make myself me, not everybody that was around. Entities, other people who attach onto you. That's a real thing. Little globons. You've got to get rid of those. You can't need those. Any kind of attachment. Okay, here's the big one, curses. We don't talk about curses in our lifetime. But I'll tell you, I run into them when I'm doing clearing for people over the years. Schoolyards, prime example. And do you know where curses come from? Mostly jealousy. You're jealous of somebody. One of the stories I always remember when I was like clearing this gal's energy. Excuse my voice this morning. I seem to be very slow this morning. So when I got up, anyway, curses. People don't want to believe they're real, but they are. And one of the ones I had to smile at this little story was this gal. I said to her, "Do you trip?" She said, "Oh, I'm tripping all the time." I said, "Well, what I see here is that you were dancing, and this other gal was jealousy. Jealousy is behind all curses, and it's like it goes as an arrow. And if you follow the arrow, you can find where it hits, and that's where you can go in and actually, like the poison arrow, we can remove that thought form. It's a thought form that's sent to you. And this girl was watching, very jealous that my client was dancing, and she threw the thought out, "You're going to trip." And she did. She tripped. She was very receptive to getting it. So now what happened, she used to find that she would trip at all sorts of times. Like for no reason. It just seemed like she couldn't stay on her feet. She would trip. And so that when we cleared that, my client felt very happy because she couldn't figure out why she was tripping. Like, why am I tripping? But people tend to send curses, not always, but usually the upper part of the body, like from up the chest up into near the head also. But that I always thought was funny because it was so directive that this from the jealousy of this other gal. So it's like unhooking and clearing. These kind of things that we're just talking about here affects the nervous system. So your nervous system, and then you've got an old brain. I never understood the old brain until I was at a lecture and they showed on a model where all the parts that go into your head, that the very bottom part of your brain at the back is what they call the old brain. And that's the memories from when you were what would you call it? An early man. These are the old brain, old memories. So some of those we need to clear as well. Now, another thing that a lot of people don't realize, we have what I call program reinstillers. So, okay, at some point you made a decision yourself. It wasn't one that was projected on you. It was you decided something about yourself. And then you grow on up and you realize, well, I don't want to have that. That we got to work on that. I don't want to deal with that. And what happens, because we're smart, humans are smart, is that what we do is we have this little program. So when we clear it, this is why I find this part here where I have a little box saying program reinstillers. And if that shows up, I know I have to be very careful to make sure we get everything, because what'll happen, you will do all this clearing work. And many of you may have done this. You've done all sorts of different things to clear this, clear that, clear the other. And all of a sudden, you're reacting the same way. So what happens is that program reinstiller reinstalls it, the belief, the decision. Beliefs come from decisions. Everything is a decision. So program reinstillers are really important to catch and annihilate, really, totally move them out, dissolve them so they can't come back together and reform. And that's a good thing to watch for if you're really into self-growth and you want to watch how you change, like different things you think you've cleared, because there's all sorts of clearing techniques. But what I found is that I've talked to different therapists, and what do you do about program reinstillers? And they look at me like I am crazy. But I'm not. I'm like a detective. If something doesn't change, I want to find out how come. And that's when I ran across program reinstillers. And that's where we tend to reinstill what we just cleared. So waste of money, waste of time. But the key is if you don't get it as a reinstiller, that part, that program in there that so that you stay and maintain where you originally at. The other element, of course, is the subconscious. Now, I was incredibly lucky. And it wasn't that long ago. I was sitting down thinking, what do I need to do about this subconscious? And a guide came to me, told me how to clear the subconscious. I mean that, totally clear it. Unfortunately, it was when COVID was came along, and a lot of my can't see clients directly, and even now I don't. I wasn't set up after that to several years of not having anybody come in person, kind of thing. But the subconscious can be cleared. And again, that is something sometimes people will say, oh, well, it's in the subconscious, there it is. No, no, you can clear that. There's a way of doing that. And then every one of these other elements I'll put other, because I don't know it all yet. So all these things that go through. Now, I always check down the bottom of my sheet, checks and balances. Do you have a doubter? Do you have an objector? Do you have a distractor? Do you have any jobs that got to be done or anything else? What? Always have other. On every little thing I've talked about, we always have this little other because there's always that one little piece if you don't catch it. We doubt. We doubt ourselves. We doubt society. We doubt how things work. We doubt all sorts of things. And that's a program. If you're a doubter, that's a program. That means it's come from a decision that you've made, if not in this life, and probably more than likely in other lives where things haven't worked out as well as you would like. Or you have an objector. You object to everything. It's not. And also, I've got to mark down here distractor. In other words, you want to do this, but you get distracted over here or over there or this or that. Anything than dealing with what is. You find this very often when people come in to start doing transformation work. They have, I always say that the what is it when the concentration of a gnat. In other words, you know what a gnat is, that little thing that comes in around, and it's like to have them concentrate on everything for more than a couple of minutes. They find it really, really hard. So it's really important to be able to do that, to figure that out. Jobs. What jobs do you have? What's your job? Where and what? How does that work? Or anything else. Always have other everywhere because we never know what it's going. So programming instillers, subconscious are not always understood, I find. So what we look for is an alignment with the consciousness, subconscious, and superconscious. Superconscious is your spiritual, philosophical side. Your consciousness is now. I look into this is another little tool I have, is a little power shell from New Zealand, shell put in with these little cards that have one word on them. I used it a lot in my meditation group. Everyone would pick a card, and then that would be what they would concentrate on. So here's one I always like: celebration. I'm a great believer in, what's that one? Spontaneity, yeah. I'm a great believer, and I'll put that up close. Celebrate life. Any opportunity to celebrate, I'm on for it, I'll tell you. And so we need the consciousness, subconscious, superconscious mind. And when we've gone through all this shit, which may be an hour and a half, maybe, and very sad, only when you get really clear, we get to an hour. And then the final part is to forgive and forget. And then you make a little like a never ending thing to wrap it all up. So we discuss, we look at habits, we look at numbers, colors, other things, because we went through it. So when people come for a reading, it's really simple. I just read cards, mostly. But if you want to really change that part of you that runs your life, then it's the biggest session. And they can take up, in the beginning, sometimes an hour and a half, sometimes longer, depending what we're going in. We always go in on a topic. The topic is now. How do I know when I'm going through one of my chats which one? My pendulum. I have many pendulums, but this one I like the best because it travels well because it's heavy, and you can see looking at it is it's got all pendulums have a sharp basic point. So you when you're learning to work with pendulums, you basically think yes, and that's my yes, back and forward that way. If I think no, it goes around. Some people it's opposite, and it's not right or wrong. I heard someone say, "Oh, I don't know why my pendulum always goes round when looking for a yes." I said, "Well, that's because that's your system. It's all right. Accept. We don't. Sometimes there's too many rules, but I this is what I use a lot. Or figure out where we're going, what we're doing, where the issues are. All comes from this. It directs me into where we're going. So if I'm doing readings, I will look at the numerology part and I'll do a reading based on now. If I'm doing clearing work, transformation work, which is what I really like for people to do, because then it makes working with their lives so much easier and so much. And it took me years to figure it all out. But I wanted to do this because I miss some of this. I miss working with my crystal balls. Um, Remember, I'll put the little one up because that's really heavy. But I see pictures in these relating to the people. I ask questions of it and I'll see pictures. So this was my travel one because I could travel with it. But I also used to draw with my colors, just drawing, just crayons, basically. Auras, their colors, what was going on, how it was. All of this I don't do. A lot of this I don't do now. Um, when I say COVID, and I know I talk about how COVID changed my life because it did. I couldn't have clients in. I couldn't have people meditating, and that what did that go on for 2 years, 3 years? That's why I'm here talking to you through the magic of YouTube. And you probably heard the story. I was sitting here. What am I going to do? And I went, oh yeah, right. Years ago, I used to because I love going to the movies, which we couldn't really do much of during COVID either. Um, I would type up my what critique the movies, and I started this little thing, and every now and again for quite a while, I would put in a movie review, and I went, "All right, I have that channel. Maybe I should start talking." So I did every Wednesday mornings. And then it grew. So now we have 3 times and sometimes more. Life is an experiment. Life is there to enjoy and to be. And I just trust what little bit I know if I share it, that somebody else will learn by that. Somebody else will get it. Uh, yes. I've got a nut in my chain here. I'm picking at it because I want to undo that. So, Maggie, I want to say good morning back to you and blessings to you as well. And oh, happy day. Oh, yeah, every day I'm alive. I get up. Oh, I'm still here. I wake up. Um, and so I really want to thank you for listening to this. And if your friends don't know too much about how the psychic works, I developed what I call my psychic muscle, basically, through the tarot. That's where I began. I just love that this was on top. Everything. I learned so many things from my tarot teacher. I studied with him for 3 years while I was having kids. And I value all that I learned. I've written, what did I write? 3 books about it. Yeah. Because he had a different viewpoint. And I kind of followed suit with that, looking at life a little bit differently. We think of as a prism. It's like when we look at the crystal ball. Some people look in it because they just don't know how to look, but it's because you don't look right in the bowl, you look down and through it, but you're using your third eye when you're looking. So it takes a little bit of experience and awareness of how to do that. But there's so many ways we can find out about, well, can't talk either, where our lives going, why they're going the way they are, and if we want to change. Thought is really big. How we think, what we feel, what we do, how we respond. Are we perfect? No. We are humans. Humans have frailties. They have emotions. We're not an emotionless species. That's one part of us that we need to understand, accept, and work with it so that we create the best that we can with it. I think that's all. No one else has put any big questions in. Maggie says hello, and I appreciate that. Uh, just to know that Wednesday mornings I do more of my talk, like you might say a little bit of a lecture, if talk about something anyway. Where on Sunday morning I just give a thought about something philosophical. But Monday is when we do the prayer called mental mind treatment for the different ailments that people come up. And I have to tell you, it, it warms my heart when I hear how much better people are feeling. Sometimes we have to do 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, but they can come back with it and then they say, oh, it's feeling better, or I'm getting better, or it's happening. Different things happen. And that's where I'm able to utilize what I love to do. And if you join in, you can join the benefits of that. Anyway, I love chatting. I love talking. So thank you very, very much for listening. And I trust you'll recognize, and I got to play with my tools because they were sitting on the shelf and I haven't been using them and I missed them because people used to come and in person and I could, do what needed to be done. And now the majority is through Zoom. Wonderful for Zoom. I mean, that was one of the other things I discovered was Zoom because people couldn't be here. And now the way I live, because things have been adjusted a little bit, it's easier. And I'm not really set up for people to come. They can, but I'm not really set up for it. Anyway, blessings. Life continues. Thanks very much for watching. Blessings to everyone. Bye now.